You've seen the best.
You've seen the worst.
Now here's the rest of both worlds.
I'm GayFesh, and now you know.
And I'm Ari, and knowing is half the battle.
And I'm Silent. G.I. Joe!
And today we will be discussing the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Symbiosis. Silent, welcome to the show. And you nailed that.
I have a habit. When I drink with my best friend, we will at some point watch compilations of all the Fensler film, G.I. Joe, what do you call them?
They were like YouTube poops before YouTube poops. I don't even know what you would call them. But
What's a
yeah.
YouTube poop?
Well, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But yeah, Silent, welcome to the show. We're friends from the Demon Mama community. Actually, I think I'm the one who got you into Star Trek. Is that right?
No, not quite. I've definitely watched Star Trek before I talked to you, but I did, your love of Star Trek did sort of push me towards getting into Star Trek Next Generation and watching it more regularly.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, how far are you into that show now?
I'm about halfway through season 4 right now.
Nice.
I lost access for a while, but I've got a plug for Star Trek again, so I am making my way through season 4.
That's a good season to get through.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit more about your relationship with Star Trek. What have you seen? What does it mean to you?
I've mostly seen original series stuff. I must have caught an episode on Sci-Fi or something in my early teens, and it has that delicious combination of solid science fiction writing, sort of the lightning in a bottle of a perfect dynamic between your Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, but also just the absolute jankiest absurdity that can happen at the drop of a hat. An episode can seem really normal, and then it'll just end with Ron Howard's weird-looking little brother laughing with a really bad dubbed-over voice.
That's right. That was Clint Howard.
That was Clint Howard, yeah.
He's my favorite weird little guy that does things. That was an original series? He was in the original series?
As a little kid, yeah, he played a little alien where they didn't even put makeup on him. He just looked like himself as a little kid.
I had no idea.
Rather unfortunate. I think they put a bald cap on him, but other than that, it was just... And then they had an adult dub over his voice, so he felt more alien. But it was just hey kid, you're ugly. Why don't you be an alien?
Yeah, let's get Opie's little brother in here. That's so weird. Okay, that's something I didn't know.
I want to say they gave him weird eyebrows. That seems like a thing they would have done.
Something like that. Something easy, yeah. Either that or they just actually shaved his head because he was... Yeah, all right, let's get into the episode.
All right, today we are talking about Symbiosis. It is the 22nd episode of the first season. It aired on April 18th, 1988. The teleplay was by Robert Lewin, Richard Manning, and Hans Beimler. The story was written by Robert Lewin, and this episode was directed by Wynn Phillips.
Okay, so they get a distress call while they're looking at solar flares, and the guys who are running the ship have absolutely no idea how to run a ship. They're giving very vague answers yeah, I don't know, shit's broken.
Yep.
Yeah, can you help us? And so they end up having to beam them over because they're falling into the gravity well of a planet. But they beam over their cargo first, and then they're only able to get 4 of the 6 passengers on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 died. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, 2 died, and nobody seems to care about the 2 that died.
No one gives a shit. Yeah, I noticed that.
There's 2 different species, and they're squabbling over the cargo because one species had sold it to the other, but the payment was lost in the ship that just blew up. But it turns out it was medicine.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote medicine. Actually, it was red lentils. I think
it looks like lentils, yeah.
They use lentils. Beverly examines it and finds out, no, this is a narcotic. But it turns out there's this whole thing where the aliens who are selling it, their planet's entire industry is making this drug, and they're rely on everything else for the people that they've got hooked on the drug to pay for everything else. So they're just an entire planet of drug dealers.
That is the episode. I mean, that's basically the synopsis. I mean,
and it's Star Trek, so we have our prime directive. Should we interfere? Should we not? And all that stuff. And I feel like we'll get into that. But that's basically the episode. Oh yeah, I also forgot they shoot force lightning. at
Oh
each
yeah,
other.
yeah, they definitely shoot force lightning at each other
And that I don't get it. Why did they do that?
to make them aliens. The nose thing wasn't enough, I guess. I don't know. I was weirded out by that too.
It almost seemed like maybe a writing backwards situation where they're like, well, we need them to present a threat like later in the episode. But obviously they would have had everything like confiscated. So how would we get around that?
That's true, because they did hold Riker hostage a little bit there.
And and then even Tasha said something like, "It's an impossible weapon to confiscate," or something like that. I think it was Tasha that said that.
Mm-hmm.
Surely just like make them wear some sort of electrically like insulating suits in order to prevent them from using that.
It actually reminded me of an original series episode. It's actually a rather famous episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. You probably don't know it from the name, but you do know it because it's the one with the dudes who have half of their face black and half of it white.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
With the Riddler?
Yeah, it's the episode where it was just blatant racism because it's like, well, they're bad because they're all white on the right side. We're black on the right side, so they're bad. But it also turned out that like these were like immortal aliens who had like supernatural powers that they would use to fight each other with, and it felt like that.
Huh.
There are some things about it that do feel a bit like an original series episode, which is why I did want to ask, is this one of our like little leftover scripts that they had kicking around, or was this an original?
It's an original. Actually, I had thought that they had used more scripts from Phase 2 in this, but there's only a couple that they end up actually using. I think The Child, which will be the Season 2 premiere, I think that one was modified from a Phase 2 script, and then there's The Devil's Due in Season 4, which is a Phase 2 script as well, and that one feels very TOS-y. But overall, I think they took mostly like character ideas. Like in Phase 2, when they weren't going to be able to get Spock, they had the character of Zahn, who was going to be a full Vulcan, but who was very fascinated with humanity and wanted to learn more about it. And they kind of rolled that into the character of Data. And then they had Commander Decker and Ilya, who ended up being Riker and Troy. There were a lot of things that they worked in from the Phase 2 scripts, but I think as far as actual scripts used, they only ended up using 2 or 3 of them.
Right. I guess that does make sense because it's hard to imagine that the resolution would have played out anything like this if we'd had Kirk as captain.
How about that resolution? Beverly actually says she's able to like develop a way to, you know, basically like a Narcan or something to
Right.
help wean them through their withdrawal symptoms without
A non-narcotic
suffering.
version of it that'll help them with the withdrawal, yeah.
And Picard says no because that would be interfering with them in violation of the Prime Directive. And this is an episode where I think Picard got it wrong.
I had a big problem with it. I had a problem with it because I still don't, in the context of the show, understand the Prime Directive. Because they just throw it up there and say, this is against the Prime Directive, but don't explain to us why. Because it's just like, here, it's against the Prime Directive. And I was like, the whole season you've been doing these things that would be, if you're saying this is against the Prime Directive, then like most of the other episodes you've done are against the Prime Directive.
That's what I've got in my notes. Like, they keep saying that this is a Prime Directive issue. Is it? It doesn't feel like it maps onto being a Prime Directive issue as easily as like some of the other ideas that they've been kicking around so far in the show.
It is a Prime Directive issue. I think it's a case where the Prime Directive gets it wrong, but it is very much a Prime Directive issue. Helping out a ship that's like in distress and is about to crash, that's not a Prime Directive violation. They're already a warp-capable species, and they were asking for help, so that's okay. But interfering in the like political and internal affairs of other planets, that would be a violation of it. If they were like appealing for Federation citizenship, then there would be like, well, in order to be a Federation citizen, a member, you have to meet these criteria for your planet's development and for your cultural norms, because we want to make sure, you know, we don't invite genocidal people into the Federation. But if they're just their own people, it's not the Federation's place to step in. But this is a case of clear exploitation.
Yes.
And the idea of the Prime Directive is basically a pretty liberal approach to avoiding colonialism.
Right.
So there's a lot of good that comes from the philosophy, but I don't think this would be a case where helping people stop being drug addicts would be colonialism.
No.
especially because Beverly, like, it sounded like it would have been easy for her to whip it up. And here we have people who basically have forgotten how to take care of themselves. They've basically forgotten how their ships work at this point because they've been drugged out of their mind for 200 years.
Right.
And the other people, the drug dealers, they don't know how to do anything else. All they know how to do is make drugs. I guess there is a perspective there where interfering with that could cause the collapse of that species because their entire industry is just that. I don't even think they were a warp-capable species. It's just the other species was. And then they got the disease, and they found that other planet, and they knew how to make the drug, but they didn't have much else, and so they were able to get lifted up by selling drugs.
Right.
Which is really unethical. Like, the whole thing was super unethical, but the questions that I kept thinking while I was watching it was, why? How did they get to the point where they, like, so they explained that the, I forgot the aliens' names, but the drug addict planet, they are very...
Ornaran.
Oh, thank you. They're very technologically advanced, right? That was what they said. Very technologically advanced. But then after 200 years of taking meth every day or whatever, they aren't smart enough to even run their spaceships. But, I mean, I think the world would have, like, ground to a stop a long time ago. I don't think you can get an entire planet addicted to a very dangerous drug that makes them really stupid and then not have some sort of impact that, like, lasts going on. I don't think it would have lasted for 200 years, and now we're finally running into bumps in the road. I don't know. Something about it rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, and the way that they're portrayed, like, the drug dealers are portrayed as the ones who are more intelligent and more put together. Obviously, they aren't addicts, they're dealers, but
right.
If their entire industry is relying on these other people, like, they shouldn't seem smarter than the people who are providing all of their basic needs.
Yeah.
There are some, like, foibles, I guess, with the concepts here that they require more justification than this episode can provide.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I think it was something they just kind of glossed over and were hoping we would just accept, I guess. But here we are in a podcast where we talk about it, so I'm looking at the whole episode like, well, this doesn't quite make sense, and this doesn't quite make sense.
The more I think about it, the more I feel like this concept for a Star Trek story, it could have been very well justified and felt like everything made sense if they had made it into a very boring two-parter. But instead, we got, like, a very watchable, well-paced bottle episode that kind of doesn't make sense if you look at it too long.
Well,
true.
I think it makes a little more sense if you consider the era that it came out in, where we had Nancy Reagan Just Say No and all of our after-school specials. Because halfway through this episode, the show stops so that Tasha can explain to Wesley and all the kids watching
how drug addiction works.
Yeah.
I have written in big capital letters in my notes, did Nancy Reagan write this?
Well, I don't think it could have been Nancy Reagan, because when we're considering it as an anti-drug episode, it's definitely ahead of its time in that the Onarans are presented as, like, very not relatable, but
sympathetic.
Yeah.
The Onarans are very sympathetic. They're treated as victims of this addiction, and it's made very clear that in no way is this addiction their fault.
Yeah, that is very true. If we put ourselves into the 1988 mindset, it is a very progressive, like, forward-thinking type way to look at addiction, because as we know now, addiction is a disease that can be treated. And in 88, not a lot of people were agreeing with that. They were being painted as evil and villainous.
Super predators,
yeah. See, I figured it was addiction right away, and I don't know what triggered me, because I wrote into that because early on I said, why can't Bev recognize addiction and withdrawal symptoms?
Well, she did as soon as they took it, but yeah. I mean, they're very clearly playing junkies, like, right from the get-go. You can see it.
Before we really get to see them, when we're just hearing over, like, the staticky call, they really read more as just sort of inebriated than specifically, like, narcotic addict. But yeah, as soon as we see them in person, and I would give Beverly some credit, like, it definitely seems like as soon as she is understanding that she cannot locate what the actual disease is, she has this, like, air of, like, heavy suspicion from that point on.
That's a good point, yeah.
And, like, it did make me think, like, a great concept for a Star Trek episode would just be to do House MD, but in space, right?
There have been a couple like that, I want to say. I can't think of one directly off the top of my head, but Crusher has had some, focal episodes where it is, like working to treat something. Actually, in Deep Space Nine, Bashir, I think, spends a whole episode trying to cure a planet of an affliction. You get some medical-centric episodes in Star Trek.
It's interesting that you say that too, though, Silent, because in my notes I was like, oh, they did an ER-type, West Wing-type walking-talking shot, which I hadn't really seen them do in the series, and it was right at the beginning. I think it was Riker and Tasha, but they're like walking and talking through the corridors, and it reminded me of like a shot from ER or a shot from House where they're walking through and discussing all the things it could possibly be before they break off and go do the things they need to do.
Oh, this could be a watershed moment for Next Generation then, because they're going to be doing a lot of that from now on. Like the realization that, the realization that like, ooh, we can deliver a lot of exposition, but if they're walking through the ship's hallways, it is a bit more interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't really paid attention to how much hallway dialogue has been in the first season, but that's a staple. They're always doing walk and talks through the corridor set.
Which is also, like, very much on display in-house.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Denise Crosby left the show in the first season, and even though this is not the episode in which she leaves the show, this is the last episode that she filmed. And if you look at the end of the episode when Picard and Crusher are walking out of the cargo bay toward the turbo lift, if you look in the very far back, just for a split second before the doors shut, you can see Denise Crosby wave at the camera.
See, I knew that was coming because you told me that, and I looked for it, and in my brain, I thought it was in her last episode. I had not tracked it was in Symbiosis.
Yeah, it was in this one.
So I missed it.
You'll have to go back.
Yeah.
It's in the last 2-3 minutes of the episode.
I'll have to go back and look. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't catch it the first time that I was going through. I'm just like, wait, this is the end of the episode. That should be it. And then I looked. I'm like, yep, there she goes. She just is standing there, and then she goes, bye.
The first half of this episode did feel like a showcase for Tasha, for sure.
I thought it was a very good opening. Like the whole part of it, I thought the whole opening bit was good for Tasha. Yeah, I liked it as a Tasha episode and as a Beverly episode.
Well, and to talk about Denise Crosby, she actually said that the writing for her character in this one and in Skin of Evil, she said that if she had been given more episodes like that throughout this series, that she wouldn't have left. Because she really liked, especially in Skin of Evil, she really liked the writing for her character in that one.
So it was her choice to leave then?
It was her choice to leave because she said she felt like she was underutilized. There were times where she would be like, look, literally all I'm doing is standing up on the horseshoe on the bridge doing nothing. You could just get a cardboard cutout of me, have fake legs there when you're doing the close-up shots of Picard, and nothing would change. What am I doing here?
I could see that.
The first half of this episode definitely is giving her a lot more to do, but also it's really unclear what her job is if this is the only episode of Star Trek Next Generation you see. Because at the very beginning, it almost feels like she's doing the Galaxy Quest, just sort of repeating information everybody knows bit. Like she informs Picard that the view screen interference is bad because of the sun radiation, while it's like visibly tearing and there's a bunch of static. and then her big moment, with the moments that sort of made her the MVP for the first half of the episode, was linking up the transporters, which a thing that they justify it well enough in the episode. It sounded like gobbledygook to me.
Well, it's actually seemed a little implausible to me because they would be alien transporter systems. I wouldn't think there would be any compatibility there, but it was fine. It struck me that it was Tasha doing it because Tasha's a security officer. She's not really an engineer. I mean, clearly she knows how to work the transporter, but that seemed like it was outside her wheelhouse.
Yeah, I had that thought too.
Although I think with Star Trek, especially, and you see this in the episode where Wesley was applying for the Academy, it seems like the implication is that basically every Starfleet officer is a polymath. So even though they might have a specialty in one area, they basically could do any job on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there's definitely some of that. it's a bit ironic that the one thing that would have been within her literal job description would have been like to protect Riker whenever he got taken hostage. And is she even there?
I don't even remember if she was in there.
I don't remember either, yeah.
Yeah.
For being the security officer, she has a lot of random odd jobs, and she's not always involved in security either. It's I don't know. I kind of understand Denise Crosby's feeling on that when I heard you say it. I was like, yeah, I kind of see it. I don't think they quite knew what to do. But if anyone really has this complaint, it should be the guy who plays Worf, because speaking of a character they never use, that guy, I feel so bad for him.
Well, just wait. You're in season 1, so he's, very underutilized, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. A rare Riker taking Worf's place of getting Worfed here.
Yeah, that's right.
Of getting Worfed.
So there's a TV trope called the Worf effect.
Okay.
In which Worf is the biggest, strongest person on the Enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. So every week when the alien beams aboard the bridge because security doesn't exist in the future, the first thing they do is pick up Worf and throw him across the bridge so that he crumples against the wall.
Right. Yeah, okay.
to show that they're a threat. But the effect of that is that we keep hearing how Worf is this big badass warrior, but every single week he gets his ass kicked.
Right. Can we talk about how much I hated their outfits? All of them. I hated every single one of them. But Sobi, I think the main guy's was. Oh my god, I hated his outfit so much. I was like, it was a vest, but it wasn't a vest. It was sewn that way. And I just hated everything about his sparkly vest outfit. And I just wanted to bring that up.
I do have some notes about the costume. I got the impression that Sobi is one of the Breckians, which... when we first see them, they just kind of look like the bad guys from an 80s ski movie.
Yes! With the hair and everything.
Yep.
Right. But comparing his costume to his partner's, it definitely struck me that, costume designer was way more into working on Sobi's costume. We had, a contrast of color and material. It seemed like it fit better. It actually reminded me a bit of the season 3 and onward uniforms, but with, a V-neck on it.
There's, I forget his name, but the costume designer for the original series and for the first season of TNG was a gay man, so you are not wrong there.
I was just about to bring up, because we talked about this with Riker's outfit, when he had to put on that, I was trying to remember which episode it was, when he has to put on the fancy, low-cut, one nipple showing outfit, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I had a really funny moment when they figure out that the two guys are carrying the disease. They're like, "You're carrying the plague." And the guys look at them and I'm like, yes, every single student in my school that says, "Where can I get a COVID test?" after spending 20 minutes talking to me. They do this. They come in, they have conversations with me, they act like everything normal, and then they hack into their arm and then they're like, "Hey, can I go to, do we have a COVID test here at the school?" Yes, we do. And why are you here? Go get a COVID test. But it reminded me of that because I was like, oh, yeah, of course, they're just walking around having the plague,
Oh, thinking back to Denise Crosby, there was a couple years ago on Twitter, Rick Berman, cursed be his name, tweeted a picture of a comm badge, which was Denise Crosby's comm badge. And he said... he tweeted saying, Denise Crosby gifted me her comm badge on her last day filming on Skin of Evil, and it's been sitting on my desk for 20 years. And then Denise Crosby replied, "My last episode was Symbiosis, not Skin of Evil. And after I finished filming, you walked up to me, ripped it off my shirt, and said, 'Guess you won't be needing this anymore.'"
Oh, wow. I know nothing about Rick Berman other than we all don't like him, apparently, but that's so terrible.
It's incredibly shitty.
Wow. What a dick.
Mm-hmm.
I kept thinking the Force Lightning Fingers was going to have something to do with the plague, and it didn't.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I don't know, maybe this has a spice melange thing where it's a narcotic, but it gives you powers.
Maybe the drug does give them powers.
Actually, I think they said it was due to the the solar flares, because it was a very active sun, and so they absorbed more energy or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a brief explanation of it. It ended up having nothing to do with the episode, and I think it was just so that they could threaten Riker. at some point.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end of the episode, the whole thing of the solar flares felt like it was completely forgotten.
I know. They just kind of like, we spent the first 5 minutes. Oh, I really love that part when they're like, mask out the photosphere. And they just put up a big black circle over the main part of the sun.
Which like lazily glides up to block it.
Right, like they're dragging it with a mouse. Yeah.
Right. Right after Picard had his like Donald Trump lunar eclipse moment of just staring directly into the sun.
And it's a view screen. It's not like there are some Star Treks where the screen actually is a window out, but this is just a screen. This is just a projection. So why is it so bright? Why would they have its maximum luminosity be something that could damage your eyes?
That could hurt your eyeballs. Yeah, I know. I did think it was interesting going back to the, and knowing is half the battle conversation that Tasha and Wes had, that I'm not sure I've actually seen Tasha and Wesley have a lot of interaction. And so I wondered if it was between Tasha and Wes on purpose, or if they were implying, and it seemed to be pretty well implied, that maybe at some point, back when she was on the terrible planet, Tasha had a problem with addiction as well. I wasn't sure which one of those it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed that she was a recovered addict.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it. Yeah.
One thing I really liked with that scene was, despite having no lines, the degree to which Data was really actively trying to be in that scene.
Oh, I didn't notice. Is he just like in the back making faces?
It keeps cutting to him directly, but he doesn't really say anything.
Interesting.
It seemed like he was really interested in anytime Wesley was saying that he just couldn't understand the idea of like wanting to be addicted to something. It really made me wish that we would end up with like a B plot of like Wesley, I've managed to put together an apparatus here which will simulate the effects of addiction for you so that you can finally understand.
Data would do that, wouldn't he? And he wouldn't get why it was wrong.
I know.
Yeah.
I wonder if he was staring at him, though, because he was surprised to see a human being not understand a human feeling. Because Data's used to not understanding human feelings. So maybe it was like, oh, hey, humans also struggle with understanding human feelings.
Well, that's kind of my read, especially Data's like, ooh, here's an opportunity for me to learn, and I didn't have to ask the question.
Mm-hmm. True, yeah. I didn't have to be the one that everybody looked at and was like, Data. So I take a strong problem with them calling those cylinders barrels the entire episode. And I know this is a very small nitpick, but the first time they showed up, when they beamed them up and the cargo came instead of the people, I was like, they sent bombs? Like, that was my first thought. And then they kept referring to them as barrels, and that also bothered me. And I was wondering if anyone in the Federation has ever seen a barrel before.
Yes, they have.
I mean, Picard is a vineyard owner, right? So.
No, they have barrels. I think, honestly, it may have just been a case where the prop designer just decided to go. It's like, you know what? I want to make this tall and skinny, and then somebody was like, "That's not a barrel anymore." But they didn't call the writer on set to change the line, so they
change
just
the
stuck
word.
with it.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was weird. But I mean, I found myself the whole entire time being on Beverly's side of this episode of like, we need to help them. I mean, were we not supposed to be on her side? Was it written so that Jean-Luc was always in the wrong?
Well, it's written that Jean-Luc is in the right because that's the premise of Star Trek is that, Picard is right. Picard's interpretation of the Prime Directive is usually supposed to be the correct one. But they do offer Crusher as a counterpoint. And she often is the compassionate voice against the Prime Directive in these episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I appreciate her perspective there.
I did too. Yeah.
I wish it had been touched on a bit more directly because it ends up just being more of like a subtext. But like, if Crusher could have brought up her Hippocratic Oath and how that's in like direct like conflict with the Prime Directive here, and like she's sworn 2 oaths here, how is she supposed to fulfill both of them? Whenever there's seemingly no way to do that.
That's a really good point. Yeah. What do you do when those two things conflict?
I think there is a season 6 episode that is directly about that. Like, it's a Crusher-centric episode about that. I don't remember the name of the episode, and I'm struggling to remember all the details, but I have a vague recollection that there is one that is Crusher-focused where she did something that was in violation of something. And she has to struggle with the ethics of it.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, this is just an aside, but so remember how in last episode, she tore up her favorite blue jacket to use as like a splint or something. She didn't have a blue jacket this entire episode. And I wondered if that was supposed to be like, oh, well, she tore it up saving Jean-Luc and she hasn't gotten a new one or what. But I noticed she didn't have her favorite blue jacket this entire episode. She was jacketless.
Yeah.
I love her jacket, though, so I noticed.
I love anytime you get a variation on like the standard outfit. Like Picard gets a suede jacket in season 5 that I actually happened to own one of those that was like an official replica made. It was like $200. It's pretty nice. Or in like the original series when Kirk had that wraparound tunic, the green one. Anytime there's like a special costume piece for like one character, I really like it. I think in Voyager when Roxanne Dawson was pregnant, they had B'Elanna wear like a jacket, like an engineer jacket kind of a thing to hide that. But it looked nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know the Kirk wraparound thing you're talking about too, which is a cool looking one.
Oh, I love that. It's one of my favorite costume pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which episode specifically, but I remember there is a Klingon, like a more adorned version of like a Klingon uniform. Like it shows up on like one Klingon, and then almost every Klingon-centric episode after that, multiple Klingons show up wearing it. It's just like, they just really liked how this looked, right?
Or once they had it made, they were like, now that we have this made, we can continue to use it. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate seeing the Klingon development throughout the series, because we've only had like one Klingon episode this season, and where they had all the same they used the same molds for the foreheads of all of the Klingons that showed up other than Worf.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of just, okay, we've got these props left over from the movies where the Klingons showed up, so we'll just use all of that. And then eventually they get Ronald Moore joins the writer's room, and he's like, you know what?
Wait. Ronald D. Moore, as in
Ronald D.
Battlestar
Moore.
Galactica?
Do you know why he made Battlestar Galactica?
No, I don't, actually. Because he had
that-
done Roswell before that.
Because after Deep Space Nine ended, he joined the writer's room of Voyager and quit after 6 episodes because the studio was like, you can't have any long-running story arcs. And he had just come off Deep Space Nine, which had like a 2-season arc of war. And he's just like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with you doing the reset button every week on the ship that's lost in space all alone with no support. So then he's like, why don't I write that show? And then it's Battlestar Galactica.
Well, I love Battlestar, you know that. Speaking of Battlestar, just excited to share this. There's rumor that there's a Bo-Katan show coming. And I would love to see Katie get a show where she gets to be the star again.
Oh, I love Katie Sackhoff. I've got a photo with Katie Sackhoff.
I know you have a photo with Katie Sackhoff. Every time I see it, I get jealous because it's not just Katie Sackhoff. It's
Trisha Helfer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was actually, when I got that photo, they hadn't cast Captain Marvel yet, and so there was a rumor that Katie Sackhoff might be playing Carol Danvers, and so I asked her, and she's like, I don't think that's happening.
She would make a great Carol Danvers, actually.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just a good one. I just watched Endgame again last night, and now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, she would make an excellent. Yeah. Anyway, we're on a tangent, but I love Katie Sackhoff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm really concerned about, I don't recall it ever being referred to in the episode. Do we have any idea if the withdrawals from Felicium have any sort of mortality rate? Because Picard definitely makes it sound as though, like, oh, I mean, they're going to feel bad for a while, but it'll all be okay.
Right, whereas withdrawal in real life kills people. I've had that thought, too.
I had that thought, too, and it seems like if the withdrawal would have killed them, that Beverly would have mentioned that, or one of them would have mentioned it. I mean, I think they said that they were dying from a plague, but they didn't really mention like death counts, and maybe it's just withdrawal makes you feel like you're dying.
As somebody who's been on a lot of medications on and off my whole life, and various different pain medications because of my chronic illness and having to change them, it does feel like you're dying when you're withdrawing from those medications. It feels like you are literally dying.
Yeah, but it would definitely interfere with the big lie here that it is still a plague if, like, okay, so we looked at it, and nobody has died of this in the past 190 years.
Yeah.
That's true. But they're both kind of stupid, right? Because neither of them has developed their educational system.
They haven't developed an FDA that would recognize that the Sackler aliens have been pushing OxyContin on everyone.
Right, exactly. I texted you in the middle of the episode when I was watching it, and I was like, what's the name of that guy who went to jail? He had the Wu-Tang album, because like they reminded me of that guy, yeah.
Oh, Martin Shkreli, the Pharma Bro?
Yeah.
Speaking of Martin Shkreli, does it feel like this episode, and maybe this is not an okay thing to say, especially in season 1, does it feel like this episode could have used more Ferengi presence?
Yeah, if the aliens had been Ferengi instead of like a symbiotic relationship, then maybe Picard would have like... Yeah, if it had been Ferengi, Picard would have intervened.
Yeah, he would have 100%, because everybody has a bias against the Ferengi.
Right, but like, if the planet that's being exploited by the Ferengi, like, if they're not a Federation planet, then you would think he wouldn't interfere.
I think if this, like, I don't know why I'm attached to this idea of this being a bad two-parter episode instead of an all-right single episode. If this had been a bad two-parter, that would be the good reveal in the second episode that, like, wait a minute, the Ferengi are behind this.
Especially because of exploiting people for profit. That does seem very Ferengi.
Mm-hmm.
Also because, like, so many times in the first season, we've seen Picard go, oh, something's going wrong. Is it the Ferengi? Are the Ferengi
It's
behind
the
it
damn
possibly?
Ferengi.
Could it be the Ferengi? And it's never the Ferengi. We've only had 2 Ferengi episodes.
Well, like, Roddenberry wanted to build the Ferengi up as the big antagonistic alien species in the first season, right?
Yeah, they were supposed to be the new Klingons, but they had butts on their heads and nobody took them seriously.
They do have butts on their heads. Every time you say that, it makes me laugh.
It definitely feels like a missed opportunity here. This could have been a good showcase for them as, like, genuinely insidious villains.
Yeah. Yep, you're right.
I like
Missed
that
opportunity.
Get new
I'm going
headcanon.
rewrite in this episode. It was the Ferengi and Picard helped the planet.
There we go. Now that we've wiped that up, so wrap this episode up, we're good to go.
At least that way Picard does something, because, like, there's just no resolution here, is there?
My husband, who watches the shows with me when I'm preparing to do the podcast, was like, I bet Beverly's gonna like hypo spray those 2 with the drugs so they get addicted. I was like, not a bad idea, actually.
Or just make them some lentil soup.
Right.
Or just make them some lentil soup they'd give their birthright up for.
Yeah, it definitely feels like for the first 20 minutes, we have Tasha Yar is sort of like an MVP. For the next 20 minutes, Beverly Crusher's an MVP. And then for those like last 4 minutes, Picard does nothing but acts as though he resolved everything. It reminds me of the Leonard Nimoy joke from Simpsons. You didn't even do anything, didn't I?
And then he beams out.
That is so true, though. He really didn't do anything other than nothing. No, he did nothing. I don't know.
One thing I found out, and I knew I recognized the actors, but Sobi and Tajan, their actors, were both in The Wrath of Khan. Sobi was played by Judson Scott, and he played Joaquin, who was Khan's lieutenant. And Merritt Buttrick, who played Tajan, he played Kirk's son, David.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Kirk had a son in The Wrath of Khan?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. Okay. My brain is like, okay.
It's understandable you'd forget that. They do write the son out in the next movie.
Okay, that's probably why I just forgot it existed. Yeah.
But then I also found out, unfortunately, that Tajan was Merritt Buttrick's last acting role. He died of AIDS like a year later.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's awful, yeah.
There's actually there's a lot of that going around in the 80s.
Yeah.
The gay costume designer I mentioned, the reason that he's only a costume designer for the first season is because he died of AIDS.
It was a real epidemic. I know people don't really talk about it anymore, but like people were dying like all the time. And I mean, I don't know, like it was such a big thing, and I was born in 79, so I was a kid and I was aware of its impact, but I was raised in a house where it was like, well, they got what they deserved because Jesus or whatever. And so it's something as an adult I've had to come to grips with, that this entire thing happened within a large community of people that I'm now closely, involved with, and we don't talk about it as much. Gay guys, older gay guys talk about it some, but like it seems like a lot of it is kind of just swept under the rug,
Yeah.
You run into the problem of like the people who would be most likely to talk about it are the ones who died.
Are gone. Yeah, and that's why you kind of have to help them have a voice,
And that's a big reason why people were like, why do we all of a sudden have all these gay kids? And I'm like, we always had all these gay kids.
Yep.
Your generation just lost all of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's definitely a blind spot for Gene Roddenberry, as interested as he was in so many social justice issues. Do you know, is there an episode of Star Trek that really tries to draw attention to the AIDS epidemic? Because I didn't realize that it was happening around the show in the way that it was, losing a costume designer, losing
right.
Guest actors from episodes to that degree.
No, there was an episode of Star Trek Enterprise that talked about AIDS. In a roundabout way, it was a Vulcan disease that was transmitted through mind melds that T'Pol has. And it was more about the stigma of it. The episode's called Stigma. And I think that had been UPN was doing a thing where for that month, every show was going to do either an AIDS-centric episode or a socially minded, socially focused episode.
Because Enterprise is early 2000s, right?
Yeah. So that would be a little late on the AIDS epidemic, but as far as gay issues in Star Trek, they were always a little late. We didn't get an official gay character until 2017.
I was going to say Stamets, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there are other episodes of Star Trek that can be summarized by memes to the degree that this one can? Because this whole episode is they feed us poison, so we buy their cures while they suppress our medicine.
I don't know how many other episodes that can be just summed up as a Saturday afternoon special.
A very special episode of Blossom. Yeah.
Do we ever, in any other materials of Star Trek, do we ever find out what happened with the Brekkian and Onarans? I would assume they would have to go to war, but at some point.
No, it's never brought up again, although Lower Decks really likes to have episodes where they go to planets that were visited in other series and find out what happens to them afterwards. So who knows, maybe future season of Lower Decks gets to visit that planet and find out what happened.
That'd
be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I do know there's one thing that this episode was missing, and it needed at the end for Sonic the Hedgehog to show up and say, "That's no good."
Yeah, ideally. I did feel the ending of the episode also felt weird, even if we're not getting into the fact that there wasn't really much of a resolution. It felt like there was a bit of extra stuff there on the bridge to close out the episode, with Picard going, "I don't care, let's just get some distance between us and this system."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt I don't know, it felt I know what you mean. I didn't know how to describe it. It felt let's try to make it feel like everything's normal and we're ending the episode and everything is going back to okay, but it's not quite. It felt off.
It doesn't quite have the impact of let's get the hell out of here.
Now you're going to make me go on a tangent about City on the Edge of Forever, but I'll save that for another day.
Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ari.
And I'm GayFesh.
And I'm Silent.
And until next time,
live long and prosper.
Thank you for listening. You can find more episodes on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Twitter @RestBothWorlds. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/restofbothworlds for bonus content and hear your name at the end of each episode.